Good afternoon. My name is Shara Savage. I'm a consultant in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Today, we'll be providing information on KDE as it pertains to the fall state administration of the ACT. I am also joined by Scott Calvert, the ACT consultant, who will provide you with ACT policy. We have a packed agenda, but we will provide time at the end to take your questions. And we have our very own Pam Powers with us, who will be monitoring the DAC info for your questions. So let's dive into the overview of the fall administration. Kentucky Senate Bill 1 mandates college admissions exams as a part of the state testing program. ACT currently is the vendor providing that exam. During the administration of the ACT, the COVID-19 pandemic forced Kentucky schools and the country to shut down. KDE is we worked closely with ACT representatives to provide additional options for the state-funded ACT testing. KDE was able to secure ACT fall dates for the 2019-2020 juniors who did not test on March 10th and accommodated students who were unable to complete testing due to absence or school closures. Although Senate Bill 1 that mandates that grade 10 and 11 students take the college admissions examination, grade 10 participation has been contingent upon available funds. Additional funding was not provided to KDE that was needed to test sophomores during the past spring. Therefore, the 2019-2020 grade 10 students did not take the state administration of the ACT during the spring and will not be included in the fall administration. KDE will continue to seek funding for future years' administration in order to comply with Senate Bill 1. I just want to make a note here that the fall administration option is only available to the 2019-2020 juniors who did not participate in the spring testing windows. This is not an opportunity to retest. The state-funded testing program, which does not include the writing test, is separate from any ACT products that students and districts may choose to purchase for their individual purposes. All ACT material used in state testing should be handled separately from school or district purchase materials. ACT hosts a website for Kentucky testing information. On the site, you will find the schedule of events, test administration manuals, technical guides, user guides, instructional videos, links to PAN, TAA, and much more. You will find a link to the Kentucky ACT site on our KDE webpage. Now let's take a look at our fall administration dates. For districts and schools that could not test on March 10th, so you did not test at all during the spring, here are your initial and makeup dates. The first row of dates in the table refers to the date used in the initials, the standard initial testing. The second row of dates in the table refers to dates used for the initial accommodation paper testing. If you are testing students with accommodated materials, you will test during the accommodated testing window. Online testing options are not available for the fall administration. The third row of dates on the table includes the date for standard makeup testing. And then the final row of dates on the table refers to dates used for the makeup accommodations testing. Now, for schools that tested on March 10th, so any school who was able to, school or district that provided some testing, this is your dates. So if you were able to administer the statewide ACT, March 10th was the school's initial ACT testing window. Only one additional date is needed for makeup. Therefore, if the school's initial test date was March the 10th, your makeup date is September 22nd. It is required for schools and districts under this scenario to select the initial testing window as their makeup window. If a school or district, if you're not going to be in session during this initial window, testing window, or your makeup window, please contact me for guidance. An important note that I want to make here, although OAA is using the terminology of makeup testing for this scenario, you will hear ACT later on refer to it as the initial testing window. So I just wanted to clear that up before so we didn't have any confusion later on. So who is expected to test? The fall administration option is only available to our 2019-2020 juniors who did not participate in the spring testing window. As I stated before, this is not an opportunity for students to retest. This summer, OAA sought assistance from DACS to identify students who are eligible for ACT state testing this fall. OAA opened the ACT Fall State Administration Student Review for the 2019-2020 juniors who missed their opportunity to take the ACT. During the spring administration of the ACT, this process allowed districts to request changes in who is eligible to test this fall. ACT provided the data file of students with scores to KDE. OAA reviewed the students who had scores and compared it to the students enrolled within IC in March. Lists were created for DACS to review students who tested and the students who did not test or were unable to complete testing. DACS had the opportunity to request to add or delete students who may be eligible for fall testing. KDE compiled the feedback from DACS and will deliver the eligible student information to ACT via an SDU file. ACT will then take that SDU file and load it into PAN. Students' records will be available for review and verification in August. Please note that the verification of student enrollment must be completed by August 21st to ensure barcode labels and materials ACT distributes for the September 22nd initial test date are complete and accurate. If a school needs to add a student, so if you miss the deadline for the July 22nd cutoff to add a student, please email me with the student's name needed to be added, along with the reason that you feel that the students are eligible by August 17th. So who is eligible to test this fall? All students designated as juniors during the spring 20 administration who missed their opportunity to test will be expected to have the state-administered ACT score or an improved non-participation. This includes students who have previously taken the national ACT exam, students who took the ACT as juniors last year and are retained. This policy has not changed. We just have one exception. If the student did not get a chance to test as a junior in this past spring and they was retained, the student has the opportunity to take the fall administration. If the student did get a chance to test as a junior this past spring and was retained, this student is not eligible for the fall assessment. But note, if he or she is still a junior in spring 2021, the student will take the spring ACT per the administration code for Kentucky's Educational Assessment Program regulation. Foreign exchange students in grade 11 per the federal Every Student Succeeds Act should participate in the ACT state administration. Therefore, if they were juniors during the 1920 school year and were unable to complete testing, they would test this fall. Now, who is exempted from testing? Your alternate assessment students, they will take the TAR instead. First-year EL students are not required to participate in ACT. If these students are planning to enroll in college, this might be their only opportunity to take the ACT at no cost to them. They may take the exam. If they choose to participate and meet KDE benchmarks, their score can be used to meet post-secondary readiness indicator in the Kentucky's accountability system. Students who were not classified as juniors during the spring administration do not participate. Students who are homebound or hospitalized are not necessarily exempt from testing. However, the medical conditions or disability will determine how the situation is handled. Off-site testing is available for homebound students or hospitalized students due to the diagnosed disability. DACs may apply through the TAA system. During the COVID pandemic, home or hospital testing may not be advisable or be allowed by your district. The health and safety of students, test administrators, and proctors should be the first priority. If an eligible student are unable to be tested at home or in the hospital due to health or safety concerns, they will have the opportunity to take the Spring 21 ACT administration. If a student needs to test at home or in a hospital due to a medical emergency, the student may use off-site testing. No application is required in TAA. The ACT may be administered in the student's home on a case-by-case basis. There are no requirements for the homebound or hospitalized students to be tested. If test coordinators are uncomfortable entering a student's home, any homebound or hospitalized students who is eligible but did not test in the fall may take the Spring 21 ACT assessment. ACT will provide more information about these circumstances in an upcoming training on August the 6th. Now, how to handle testing at an alternative school. If you are a test coordinator at an alternate or a non-A1 school, your school will receive test materials for testing your own students if you have the following. If the school is listed in PAN, the school's indicated participation in PAN, the school's students are loaded in PAN. It is important to note any additional materials can be ordered prior to the deadline for newly enrolled students. Students are expected to test at the high school where they attend when possible. If you have unique circumstances but must test students at an off-site location, ACT will assess a plan for approval for off-site testing. So if you have that situation, please submit a detailed plan to me via email with the following details. Does schools have adequate staff members at the off-site location? Confirm the school and student will be who will be tested. Confirm there is a designated secure storage area for testing materials separate from the other testing materials. If transporting the materials, provide a detailed plan on how those materials are being transported. This information should include who will be transporting and have access, how and where the materials will be located during transport, and any additional details you are able to provide about the transportation of the materials. Now let's touch on SDRR and non-participation. Districts will be given the opportunity to complete an ACT data review process in SDRR prior to public reporting. The timeline for the data review will be provided to DACs in a DAC email. After KDE receives the data from ACT and prepares the data for review, the SDR data review process will include all ACT data from spring and fall testing for a final review before results are reported in the school report card. KDE was granted a waiver by the USED to bypass standardized testing and statewide accountability for the 2019-2020 school year due to the national emergency. If school accountability is in place for the 2021 school year, the ACT results will be used by students to demonstrate post-secondary readiness. Additionally, ACT results are planned to be publicly reported in the school report card. All eligible students are expected to participate in state-required assessments unless the student experienced an acute medical condition or an extraordinary circumstance. Non-participation reasons should be documented locally during testing and then submitted in SDRR during the data review period prior to public reporting. Examples for non-participation include not attending in-person sessions during the pandemic, absent on test day and makeup day, participants in the alternate assessment, first year ELs, medical, expelled without services, and withdrawn after the testing window began. Note all eligible students not attending in-person sessions in the fall during the national emergency will have the opportunity to take the Spring 21 ACT assessment. And what training is required? ACT requires trainings of its room supervisors, proctors, accommodation providers, and other testing staff. Because the ACT is being administered as part of the Kentucky State Testing Program, anyone participating in the state-required testing of the ACT must also receive training in the Administration Code regulation. Anyone providing accommodations must also participate in the Inclusions of Special Populations Regulations training. All testing staff are expected to follow state testing regulation policies, in addition to ACT's testing policies. If there are incidents of student misbehavior or testing improprieties, they must be reported as allegations to KDE and reported to ACT. Okay, let's talk about seating charts. Are they required? Yes, they are required. Seating charts must be completed for all Kentucky State required assessments, including the ACT. BACs may keep a copy of the seating chart provided to ACT. It is not necessary to create an additional seating chart to fulfill KDE requirements. What calculator policy should be used? ACT's calculator policy applies to ACT testing. As a reminder, it is required by the Kentucky Administration Code that all students may not share calculators or leave the testing area to gain access to them. ACT will be providing information on student ACT score reports in a moment, but when students receive the ACT reports, they will contain ACT benchmarks. For accountability purposes, KDE will use the benchmarks established by the Council on Post-Secondary Education. For example, if a student receives a 21 in reading, the student did not meet benchmarks for the ACT. However, the student did meet the KDE accountability benchmarks. And lastly, I want to touch on COVID-19 guidelines and testing interruptions. Here is just a brief overview of what is required, but testing staff should follow all local and state safety expectations and best practices guidelines when administering the ACT to students, including abiding by social distancing and mask protocols. Cleaning and disinfecting procedures would also apply to testing materials, desks, tables, and chairs after each student use. Now, OAA realizes that schools are opening in a variety of diverse ways this year. We wanted to provide guidance on the in-person ACT testing for this fall. ACT is currently not providing an in-home remote version of the ACT. Therefore, the decision to bring students into the building for administration of the ACT should be made in conjunction with the high school administration, central office staff, and local health department. These decisions, should I say, should be made in accordance with the local health department and state government guidelines at the time of the testing. Safety expectations provided in the document COVID-19 considerations for reopening schools should be followed during the administration. And I would like to iterate, if students are unable to attend in-person sessions during the fall testing, eligible students will have the opportunity to take the state-funded provided ACT assessment during the spring 2021 administration. And here is my contact information. Please feel free to call me at any time. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Shara. And hello, everyone. Thank you for making the time to view our presentation today. As Shara told you, my name is Scott Calvert, and I'm a program manager here at ACT within our State and Federal Partnerships Department. Next slide, please. Let's have a look at the content I'll be covering today. We will start with a review of the systems you will interact with during the upcoming fall administration. We will cover important timeline reminders and key dates to keep in mind. Information about pre-test activities and accommodations will be provided. And we will conclude today's sessions with information about data and report delivery timelines and methods before offering an opportunity for questions and answers. Next slide, please. So there is more than one system that will be used to prepare for an administration of the ACT. Let's take a moment to review these systems and their acronyms so you're familiar with them as we move through the presentation. Pearson Access Next, or PAN, is a web-based application used by testing staff to manage participation, verify and register students, and order materials. The Test Accessibility and Accommodation System, or TAA, is the site used to submit requests for ACT authorized accommodations and supports for examinees. I'd like to quickly go through the important dates you'll need to remember. I think just generally speaking, if you guys are familiar with a typical spring administration, you're used to having, a window of multiple weeks, sometimes multiple months to complete some of these key pre-test activities. And with this upcoming fall administration, the window to complete those activities is really shrinking. We're really dealing with, a week to 3 weeks to complete these activities. So it'll be important for us to keep these key dates in mind as we go forward. Next slide, please. August the 3rd is when PAN opens for the fall administration, and you can begin your managed participation and manage contacts processes on the date that PAN opens. ACT will be hosting a more detailed test administration training session on August the 4th, and another ACT hosted training session geared towards accommodations information will be held on August the 6th. Both of those ACT hosted webinars will offer opportunities for you to ask questions and get answers in real time. And if you're unable to join those live sessions, the content will be posted and uploaded to the they will be recorded and posted to the ACT hosted website. Student data will be available for review in PAN starting on August the 10th. When student information is available for review, you can begin the process of verifying student enrollment, which is a key task as it allows ACT to accurately create pre-printed barcode labels and prepare material shipments for the September 22nd test date. August 14th is the deadline date to request accommodations for students with newly diagnosed disabilities that require accommodations. That is also the deadline date to move previously approved accommodations requests from the spring administration into the fall. We'll talk about the accommodations process in greater detail here shortly. Next slide, please. August the 21st is an important deadline date, as that is the date by which you must have completed the managed participation and contacts processes, and the date by which you must have the verification of student information in PAN complete. As I stated earlier, ACT will use the information in PAN on August the 21st to determine how many materials to send ahead of the September 22nd test date and to prepare pre-printed barcode labels. So it's vital that complete and accurate information is housed in PAN on August the 21st. Materials for the September 22nd test date will arrive the week of September the 7th, and students must complete non-test portion of the answer document prior to that September 22nd test date, even if the examinee completed the non-test portion prior to the anticipated spring 2020 state test administration. Please note that all these dates and all the other important dates are included in your schedule of events, which is posted on the ACT hosted website. Next slide, please. So here again are the test dates for the fall administration. And as Shara said earlier, if your school had the opportunity to sit for an initial test date on March 10th, 2020, the September 22nd test date will serve as your makeup test date, and you should try to avoid using that October 6th date completely. Please note that ACT does view the fall administration as being completely separate and independent from the previous spring administration. So when you interact with ACT communications, manuals, and systems, that September 22nd test date will be referred to as the initial date, even if it's being used as a makeup event for your school. Again, the October 6th test date and corresponding accommodations window should only be utilized by schools who didn't test at all during the spring 2020 state test administration. Next slide, please. Additional detailed information about the various aspects of pre-test activities which are required to support a successful fall administration are outlined in the PAN user guide and will be highlighted in the ACT hosted training session that will occur on August the 4th. I'd like to use our time together today to highlight a few of the non-standard pre-test activities and opportunities given the somewhat unique nature of the upcoming fall administration here. Next slide, please. Managed participation is a required task, whether you are or are not participating in the fall state test administration. This task should only take a couple minutes to complete. If you are participating, select the papered test date you plan to administer the ACT test, as well as the start of your accommodations testing window. You will also select when you would like to receive your materials. Please note that you'll be presented with 2 material receipt dates that fall within the same week, the week of September the 7th. This is due to a system limitation, and your materials will be distributed for delivery the week of September 7th, regardless of the date you select. Please ensure that there is staff available to receive and sign for the materials at the school the week of September the 7th. If your site is not participating, please indicate that in the not participating section. You can find detailed instructions on how to complete this process in the PAN user guide. Next slide, please. In addition to managing participation, all DACs will need to manage their school test coordinator information as well. ACT sends all communications to the DAC and test coordinator listed on the Manage Contacts screen, so it's very important to ensure that this information is up to date. KDE has provided ACT with information pertaining to who the DAC should be for each district, which should help ensure that the district level contact you see on this screen is correct. The school level user information is somewhat unreliable, so it's important for DACs to verify the existing contact and add additional users as you see fit. If you need to set up a new DAC, you'll need to contact Shara. If you need to list a new person as a school test coordinator, there are 2 steps that the DAC will need to take. Step 1 is to update the Manage Contact page with the school test coordinator's information, and step 2 is creating a user account. Please note that you are able to create multiple test coordinator user accounts in order to provide access to multiple people at your school, if desired. But ACT will only communicate with the DAC and test coordinator listed on this Manage Contact screen. Slide, please. The examinees who participate in the fall administration must complete the non-test portion of the answer document prior to the test date, even if the examinee completed that information on an answer document prior to the canceled spring 2020 administration. If information is not completed before test day, reschedule the examinees for makeup testing and complete the information before the makeup test. Scores will be canceled if these actions are completed on the test day. These sessions should take approximately 1 hour to complete. When barcode labels arrive, please apply those barcode labels to the back lower right corner of the answer document. If there is no barcode label, you must manually grid the student code for each examinee in Block U of the answer document. And you will find that student code in PAN for all those students that are enrolled at your school. Next slide, please. As you heard earlier, ACT will be hosting a detailed training that is geared specifically towards accommodations and supports on August the 6th. We do want to take this opportunity today to give you some relatively high-level information about moving previously approved accommodations requests from the spring administration cycle into the fall, and requesting information for requesting accommodations and supports for eligible examinees who have newly diagnosed disabilities which require the use of accommodations. TAA is open now, and you can begin these activities now. You do not need to wait for PAN to open to begin these accommodations activities. First, let's look at requesting new accommodations. If you have any eligible examinees with recently diagnosed disabilities which require accommodations on the ACT, requests for the appropriate accommodations and supports can be made in TAA. Detailed information about this process is housed within the verification stage of the ACT hosted website. The quick start guide for requesting accommodations and/or English learner supports is a great place to start if you're new to the accommodations request process. In order to submit a request for accommodations, you will need to have access to TAA. Once you have access, you can support the request and supporting documentation directly in TAA. After ACT reviews the request and documentation that is submitted, you will receive a decision notification, which indicates if the request was approved. Please be sure to tune into the ACT hosted accommodations training on August the 6th for more detailed information. And additionally, please keep that August 14th deadline date in mind for completing activities related to requesting accommodations for students who have newly diagnosed disabilities. Any eligible examinee who was unable to sit for the spring administration can have their previously approved accommodation moved from that spring administration into the fall administration in TAA. Detailed instructions for completing the work associated with making this move can be found in the Instructions for Retesting with Accommodations document, which is available in the verification stage of the ACT hosted website. After logging into TAA and locating the appropriate examinee, you can see a history of the accommodations requests for that individual. If you see that, for example, the examinee's test date still reflects the spring 2020 test date, please see that the value in the test date field is updated to be associated with the upcoming fall administration, and then be sure to select the Assign Test Administration button. The date change effort will need to occur for any examinee who had a previously approved accommodation request that needs to be moved from spring to fall. And this activity, again, must be completed by August the 14th to ensure that the examinee has the appropriate opportunity to test with the appropriate accommodation. Moving along to reporting here, while much of the scoring and reporting activities will remain the same for the fall administration, we do want to share some timeline differences for the initial test date participants and remind you about the ways you can access the final student level data and aggregate reports that result from the fall administration. Those of you who have participated in a typical spring administration of the ACT are used to having the standard reports, such as student score labels, student rosters, individual student reports, etc., delivered on a traditional 3 to 8 week post-receipt for scoring at ACT deadline, or timeline rather. For this fall, examinees who test on the initial test date of September the 22nd will have their standard reports delivered approximately 5 to 10 weeks after the materials arrive for scoring at ACT. Examinees who participate on the October 6th date will have their standard reports generated on that more traditional 3 to 8 week post-delivery to ACT reporting timeline. So just be aware of that difference. Just like the spring 2020 reporting cycle, there are really two places that will house your data and reports. The ACT profile reports at both the school and district levels, as well as any non-college reportable score notification letters, will be made available in a static PDF format within PAN when all scoring and reporting activities are completed by ACT. You can also access student score information as those scores are released within ACT's online reporting system. Establishing an online reporting account now will ensure that you have access to the system when it becomes the loan reporting delivery mechanism for the spring 21 administration cycle. When you utilize that online reporting system, you can gather specific data for either an individual or all students within a school or district. You can review data using common analytics such as summary statistics, frequencies, crosstabs, and scatter plots. You can create graphical views of summary level information, save custom reports, and print deliverables such as labels and full student reports. If you need help getting started, there are various online reporting training resources in one convenient location. Be sure to visit success.act.org to get started. And finally, here's ACT's contact information. So the ACT hosted state testing website has all the resources you'll need to successfully administer the ACT test. If the resources posted on the website don't answer your questions, please call or email us. Please note the extension numbers are different for standard time test administration questions, which is 2800, and accommodations and supports questions, which is 1788. I want to thank you guys for your time and attention, and more importantly, for all the hard work which will result in a successful upcoming fall administration. And I think at this point, I'd like to pass it back over to KDE staff who can help us start to gather questions and give you some answers.
Thank you, Scott. We have a few questions related to the dates. The first question is, will there be another date if schools are on NTI during September and October, or will we default to spring for our students? At this time, we are moving. We realize it's still changing daily, hourly, just like it was in March. So at this time, we are moving forward with the September and the October date. So as things unfold, we will continue to provide guidance through the Monday Deck email, or we may come on here with another webcast, just depending on what takes place. But at this time, we're just going to go with the September dates. So at this point, we would say no, not to default. If you have individual concerns about your school, just send me an email and we'll work through that one-on-one at this time. And then let's see here. School starting after August 24th. What happens if a school, if a kid transfers? Scott, let you maybe address that question.
Sure. So my hope would be that the school that the student is transferring into would recognize that that is an eligible examinee and therefore should be made, created in PAN and associated with the new school. So anytime we have situations where a student needs to be created and associated with a new school, we'll want to work directly with Shara on that to iron out those details. The previous school should complete the unenroll process for that examinee, which would then allow us to re-enroll that examinee at their new school.
Okay, and then we have another one associated with the date. Is there any flexibility with that date? October 6th is during our district's fall break. At this time, the October 6th date, there's not any flexibility, but just give me an email, send me an email, and we'll work with you one-on-one to see what we can work out on that. And then let's see, Scott, I believe this one is next one is for you. So please clarify, if students completed the pre-test portion prior to March 2020, but did not test, do they have to complete it over again on new forms with new barcode labels?
And the answer to that one, Chair, is yes. So even if an examinee completed that pre-test session prior to the spring 20 administration, they will need to redo that ahead of the upcoming fall administration. Furthermore, please be sure that you guys are not utilizing any materials that might still be left within the schools or districts from the spring administration to support the fall administration. All of that should be packaged and returned to ACT, or, of course, in the case of a barcode label, you can feel free to go ahead and destroy those. But please don't mix spring and fall.
Right. And I'm assuming this one goes along with the the makeup. Their school is starting after August 24th. Let's see. I'm not sure what this goes with. It says my whole school missed the initial test date and the makeup due to the spring break. So I can get back there pretty quickly. We've got a few minutes here. Get back to those dates. And forgive me, there we go. Let's see. We're getting there. Let's get back to those tables again. Okay, so for districts and schools that were not able to test on March the 10th, these are your initial and makeup dates. So no testing happened at all in the spring. So your initial test date is September 22nd, and then you have your accommodations testing window that goes along with that initial test date. And then you have October 6th as your makeup date. Now, if your question is that you will be on fall break during October the 6th, which I think that's who that second portion was associated with. Again, just email me directly at shara.savage@education.ky.gov, and I will be happy to work with you on what steps you need to take for that. And I think it's appropriate just to go over this slide one more time. So for schools that did test, so you had some testing that happened on March 10th during that spring 2020 administration. You must select the September 22nd as your makeup date, and then you have that accommodations testing window that goes along with your makeup date of September 22nd. If you are unable to test during that, I will work with you one-on-one, case by case. Just send me an email if that is your question as well. Okay. And Ms. Pam Powers, do we have any further questions? Oh, yep, here we go. Here's another one. Will similar trainings like this one take place for the spring ACT? There's two questions in here, so I'm going to address that one first. So yes, we are currently working. We've started the prep work for the spring 2021 ACT administration, and we will be hosting trainings in November for that administration, for the spring 2021 administration. All right, and then the second question is, can ACT test coordinators wait until then to participate later in the trainings that are scheduled for next week, since we will be NTI and not testing? So if you are not testing this fall, this training here doesn't apply for you. So if you completed all your testing during March 10th and that testing window, then this training here, it doesn't apply to you. We will have additional trainings. KDE and ACT will have additional trainings, like I said, in November. I don't recall the date that we're tentatively looking at, but there'll be a training available in November for the spring 21 administration. Okay, and let's see here. There's another question. Our district will start NTI for the first 6 weeks. Are we allowed to give the test on site on September 22nd and also administer the pre-test portion prior to September 22nd? Okay, so I'll address the first part of that question. As I alluded to, let me get to that slide. Just a second. So if you are going virtually, or if you have a hybrid model, where you have the virtual and you have in person, you've got that mixture going on, or if you're just in person, whatever your model is that you're starting with, you have to work that. That is a local decision, and you need to follow that. You will work out with your district staff and your local health department. So that is a local decision. Okay. And then Scott, I'll let you take the second part of that question. So the second part, just to reiterate to you, also to administer the pre-test portions prior to September 22nd. So can they go in and do that earlier, or does it have to be that day?
So it cannot be done on September 22nd. So prior really is the key word there in the question. You must complete the pre-test portion prior to the test date. And
is that something that they can do at home, or is that something they have to bring them in to do?
You'll want to bring your students in school to complete those pre-test activities.
Okay. So yes, then, but again, those decisions to bring students in, if you are virtual only, or if you have your hybrid. I know some of the districts have students coming in Monday, Wednesdays. So testing happens on a Tuesday. So you'd have to work out, maybe for that high school that you only bring in your testing students on Tuesday and let everybody else be virtual that day. But again, these are local decisions that you'll need to work out with your district, your central office, and your local health department on how you want to do that. So if say everyone decides, no, we're just not going to take the risk, we're not bringing them in, then, and you're not going to hold the fall administration, then eligible students would then be able to test come spring 21 if they're still eligible. All right, Ms. Pam, do we have any other questions at this time? So the question is the PowerPoint available? Yeah, it will be. We'll be sending it out on Monday, along with a link to be able to see the recording on the Monday DAC email. There'll be an article in there, so watch for that. Anything else, Ms. Pam? Okay, so we have no further questions at this time. Scott, is there any last words that you would like to tell everyone before we sign off?
Just thanks again, everybody, for your time and attention here today, and best of luck. I know it's a very unusual start to the school year here, and the ACT is just one piece that you guys are responsible for. So appreciate all the hard work that you guys are doing under less than ideal circumstances. Thank you.
And I would just like to follow up with what Scott said there. I know that I've talked with many of you, and you are working really hard and really focused on just getting into school. So I appreciate your time and attention here today, and I wish all of you the best of luck. And I pray for a safe opening, and just good luck on the whole school year. So if there's no other questions, we will sign off at this time.